Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I am Michelle Morris from Consolidated Planning Group, and we have superstar Karen Mayer Cunningham with us today. We're so excited because she's fun and engaging, just delightful. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from her again, and I'm glad that you're all here to spend the hour with us. So thank you all. Thank you, Karen, for being here with us, and thank you, Kristen, and everybody for sharing your audiences with us. So before we get to Karen, I just want a few things to be mentioned. We are in webinar mode, and that means that we can't see you or hear you. So please put any questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. So anything you have to say, the best way to say it, just put it in the chat box. This webinar is being recorded. Later on today, you will get the slides and a link to the recording in your email. Whatever email it is that you registered with, that's where you'll receive that. And if you happen to be on our podcast listening, and you want a copy of the slides, you can email us, contact@cpgcares.net, and we'd be happy to get you a copy of those slides. So real quick, Consolidated Planning Group, we've been around for over 30 years doing investments in securities and life insurance for families. We are also members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we are nationally certified as Social Security advisors. And the reason we do this is because the owner of our company has two children who have disabilities. So that's why she decided to take our company in this direction so that we can help you. So we are experts in special needs financial planning. We help families with things like protection plans, figuring out lifetime care, transition planning, ABLE accounts, and of course, being an advocate and an educational tool for you. There are over 263,000 financial advisors across the whole United States, 263,000. And fewer than 200 of them focus on special needs planning. So that's fewer than 0.1%, and you are truly in the right place when you're here with Consolidated Planning Group. Don't forget the slides and the recording, Annabella, will be emailed to everybody. So no worries, as long as you registered with a correct email address, that's where the slides will be sent. So when you're thinking about who is going to take care of your child once you're no longer available, or you no longer can, you're not healthy enough to take care of them, or if you're gone from this earth, it's very, very important to start planning early. Give yourself time to answer these very big, very important questions. Give yourself time to make small changes, small incremental changes to your plans to yield bigger results. And give yourself time to make sure that your child knows their support team and has a good relationship with them so that when you're gone, it's not a stranger coming in to take care of them. Think about what is going to happen after high school. There are vocational options, residential options, and transition options that will be great for your family, but you do have to look ahead of time and make sure that you get signed up in case they have any wait list or anything like that. So without any more nonsense from me, and again, please put your questions and comments in the chat box. I will let Karen take over. And I've got your slides, Karen, so just let me know when you're ready for the next one, and you can take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. We certainly appreciate this opportunity to share with this audience. And so if we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, Special Education Boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table, from teacher professional development nationally to training individuals to become advocates. And we have one goal, and our one goal, which is probably on the next couple of slides, Michelle, is successful student outcomes. And So many people ask us, what would be the advice you would give me? I'm a new diagnostician, or I'm a new paraprofessional, or am I a parent going into a meeting? And has to remain the goal focus, right? Successful student outcomes. So we're gonna go through a set of slides to really try to set you up for a foundational piece to have those good outcomes. So next, when did you know something was different? I have done this for almost 28 years. Oof. I was 5 when I started. And one of the things that we deal with as advocates and our team is, parents often have regret. And I think that there's just a sea of well-meaning people at schools, but sometimes we have an inkling, a notion, an unction, something's a little bit different. And we are reassured by other adults or other parents that it's fine, it's fine. That's what 4-year-olds do. That's what 7-year-olds do. That's what boys do. That's what girls do. But I really want you to lean in and think about, when did you notice that something was different about your child's educational needs? Okay. And then next, how do we respond to that? And I think that this is probably the biggest barrier for parents, is they don't know how to respond. So first of all, let me just say that a 504 plan or an IEP is just something extra that your child may need in public school. It's not a scarlet letter. It doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that they need extra help. And so how do we respond to the need? So the first thing that you're going to want to do on the next slide is you're going to want to reach out to your public school system. And so wherever you might live across the street from an elementary school, my recommendation would be to either, if your child is already enrolled in public school, to reach out to the principal, or if you happen to know the diagnostician, and let them know that you're wanting to get your child tested to identify if there is a disability. And so if your child is not in school, I would reach out to the special education director for your district, city, or county, depending on where you live in the United States. And we have a very simple email that we send out. You can either write it down or just listen to the recording again, and it's very clean. It's, dear staff, this is my formal request for my child, put their name, to have formal special education testing. Areas of suspected disability are learning, attention, behavior, language, communication, etc. We look forward to coming in and signing notice and consent. It's not complicated. You don't need to send a 500-page letter that you got from I don't know who, and with all of this federal code and state statutes. That's not necessary. School districts have an onus, duty, responsibility, and obligation to test students who may be in need of special education and related services. And so that's a responsibility of the school. So make sure that you send that, and that you send the request, say it with me, in writing. I know you run into people at Aldi's and at church, and we all run into them at Target, right, and at the pumpkin patch. But that's not a formal request. And you want to make sure that the request is formal, so that we get the ball rolling. Okay. So getting your child tested to identify a disability. So what happens when I send that email to get my child tested to identify a disability? Well, a number of things could happen. They could grant your request, which is what we hope is going to occur. Or they could take 15 days and then grant your request, or take those 15 days and deny your request. But we're going to assume that they're going to grant your testing. And so let's go to the next slide. You want to make sure that you're asking for testing in all areas. And so as my friend, Dr. Michael Webb, who is an amazing superintendent in Tomball ISD and teaches at Sam Houston, the F stands for full, and a full individualized evaluation. One of the heartbreaking things that I get is I get evaluations from all over the United States, and they will be 6 pages long, because the parent asked for something with great specificity, trying to be clear about what they thought the area of need was. And they might have said, oh, the sibling has dyslexia, or his dad has ADHD, and then you limit your scope. So let me just run through what these 8 areas are quickly for you. Number 1, you're going to ask for a speech and language evaluation to include pragmatic. Number 2, you're going to ask for formal sociological. Number 3, you're going to ask for medical physical. Number 4, a full cognitive profile to include all 7 Gs. Gs are your brain skills. Number 5, formal adaptive behavior. Number 6, formal achievement. to include writing, reading, and math. Additionally, you're going to ask for OE and LC, oral expression and listening comprehension. 7, a formal psychological evaluation, or depending on where you live, emotional behavioral evaluation. And those will include 3 of the federal eligibilities under IDEA, testing for any emotional or behavioral need, counseling as a related service, a possible functional behavioral evaluation, and a need for psychological services. And then number 8, related services. And we have trainings on all of this on the Academy. By attending this webinar, you're going to get an email that will give you a link for the Academy. So you can join us because we want you to be equipped to serve kiddos however you sit at the table. But you want to make sure that you ask for that testing in writing, because if you wait till the end and the testing's not done, you may be denying your student services or supports that he needs. Okay. So the F stands for full and individualized evaluation. So the next slide. What is the point of the evaluation? The point of the evaluation is to identify the impact of your child's disability, right? And the great thing about testing, it does one of 2 things. You should write this down. It identifies or eliminates. Testing identifies or eliminates. And so we want to identify the impact of your child's disability so that we as parents and partners and school-based members can appropriately serve them. When you get the testing back on the next slide, you're going to have one of 3 outcomes. The first outcome is your child does not have a disability that needs additional support at school. So we didn't say your child doesn't have a disability. The report might say that there is a disability or there is not a disability. However, that does not need additional support at school. So what we're saying from that evaluation is based on this thorough, robust, multidisciplinary evaluation that we've determined that the general educators will be able to provide your student a proper and full education. Okay. Next outcome number 2, your child does have a disability that needs additional support at school called a 504. So a 504 plan is from the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. It's a civil right. And it is for kids in public school. It's for adults at work. It is a benefit of being an American with an identified disability that is in need of accommodations. A 504 plan has limitations, but it might be appropriate for your child. You can have accommodations. You can certainly have a medical plan. You can have a medical plan in any area if you are in school. It might have a behavior plan. But it simply means that you cannot be denied accommodations based upon your identified disability. A 504 plan does not have regularly scheduled meetings as would an IEP and or goals, but it might be appropriate for your child to get those additional accommodations they need at school to be successful. And then number 3, which is kind of the bulk of what we're going to talk about today, and the volume of kiddos that I serve, is that your child does have a disability that needs additional support at school called an IEP. An IEP is an individualized education program. And it simply means that solely the general educators would not be able to implement your educational product for your student, that your child needs more. And that more could be a number of different things. It could be a related service of speech and language therapy. It could be counseling as a related service. It could be special ed service minutes when you're in math. It could be support when you are at recess. It could be help with feeding. It could be a number of things. So anything that occurs at school, we can provide support and SDI, specially designed instruction around that, to address your child's needs. The law says that we are required to write an IEP on the next slide. The law says that we are required to write an IEP to make able the student with a disability, to enable them to make progress in light of their unique circumstances. It doesn't say anything about academics, but that we write an IEP to enable them to make progress in light of their unique circumstances. So how do we develop a complete individualized education program? So I call this the 5 pillars, and it's a general sort of framework for you to get started when you're serving a kiddo with a disability. So the next slide, we're going to talk about pillar number 1. This is a very fancy acronym, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. You should say that 10 times fast every day, a PLAF, or in some states, it's called a PLOP. We won't even talk about that, or a PLAP. And it's really the student, how does the student show up today? I like to simplify it into I should have a document that if I read the document, I could see what that child's disability looks like across settings. It should cover bell to bell, and for some kiddos, it should cover bus to bus. So I like my PLAF to be three things. I like for it to be pristine, prescriptive, and like my hair, puffy, right? Most PLAFs I get are pitiful. So we want to avoid pitiful, and we want to make them this beautiful, robust plan so people know how to serve your kiddo. I think often in present levels, we have a bunch of information that doesn't mean a hill of beans to anybody. I think it's fine that we put that in there, the amazing state tests that we all love. But talk about, what does he look like in math? What does his autism look like in math? What does his speech impairment look like in math? What does his ADHD look like at recess? What do his seizure disorder look like when he goes to a pep rally? Those are things that you need to know so that I can decide whether or not I need to write IEP goals around that. He needs accommodations or service minutes to support the general ed teacher. You can never have enough information in the PLAF about the child with the disability. So just a little bit of framework around this. If a child has 2 teachers or 7 teachers, all of those teachers need to put a blurb about that child being in their educational setting. Otherwise, we're missing things. It doesn't mean they need to put something in there because they're struggling or they have a deficit, but is he crushing marching band? Is he the king of ROTC? Would he like to skip writer's workshop? Put that in there so we can decide whether that's a deficit. Is it a deficit can be served simply by an accommodation? Do we need an IEP goal? And does he need service minutes? And so the first thing that I do when I'm sitting in a meeting with the new school district is I walk through the student's instructional day. Why? Because a lot of people at the table don't know the student's entire instructional day. They don't know their entire instructional day. So Miss Michelle might teach math, and Miss Kristen might teach PE, and Miss Cindy might teach music. Well, they teach that in separate locations. And so it's very important that when you're writing the present levels, you just very quickly walk through the daily schedule and talk about, what does that look like? Is he successful in the morning? Is he loving it at lunch? Does he have friends? Does he talk to other kiddos? That you can start to talk about the needs. Sometimes we go through this paperwork very clinically. And you have to remember, school-based members, parents don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes I don't know what I'm talking about, right? We talk in acronyms and we're like a BIP, an LRE, a UPS, a FedEx, OPI, PCS, we just IHP, and we talk in all of these acronyms, and your parents are just kind of glazed over. And then we're like, do you have any questions? No, because I don't know what you're talking about, right? So we want to make sure that we are very much involving the parents. Part of the federal code 300-324, which talks about developing, reviewing, and revising an IEP. One of those components are parent concerns for enhancing the education of their child. This should reside in the present levels. Please don't tell parents you're going to put that in the deliberations. That's part of the federal law as we develop the IEP. So make sure that you have captured parent concerns for enhancing the education of their child, and don't do that in the meeting. I'll go, hey, Cindy, any concerns about your kid? I know none of y'all would do that, right? But send the parent an email ahead of time. Anything that you want to share, what's going on at home, maybe a new setting at with grandma, changes in work, anything that might be impacting that student. What would you like to see your student gain this year? Do you know where he's struggling that we could work on? But when you are a parent and you come into an IEP meeting with 6, 7, 8, 27 other people, it's intimidating. And so let's make that process a little more welcoming and make sure that we consider the parent, who are the number one stakeholder in the federal law, and case law would call them the expert. Let's make sure that we have their concerns populated pristinely in the present levels as well. Pillar number 2. So next slide, annual goals. So a lot of people think of this as academics. And while there are certainly kiddos that have an academic need, I have plenty of kiddos that do not have a single academic goal, right? So let's not say to people, you can't have an IEP because you have good grades. You could have great grades and need an IEP. You could have terrible grades and not need an IEP. So the annual goals are built around the full and individualized evaluation that you did, any other outside reports from parents or professionals or medical doctors, and then the pristine prescriptive puffy present levels that you just wrote. And in that, it's already going to tell us the annual goals that we're going to write. What kind of annual goals could there be? Behavior, communication, social, emotional, counseling, any related service, academics, behavior, all of those things that show up at school, we could write an annual goal around it. Now, we only need an annual goal around identified needs. We don't need to write 52 goals. We don't want to overload teachers any more than they already are. We don't need 15 math goals. We don't want teachers walking around with a clipboard. We want them to teach our students. So let's look at those identified areas and write goals. And this is what I say. I would say, you know what, Bob, I know that you want to do a lot of things in math, but if you could only do one thing in the math, what would be the one thing that you would work on with this student? And those teachers will usually just tell you right away. And then we write goals around that. Okay. Next are pillar number 3, needed accommodations. Notice I put the word needed, right? I like jewelry. I like lots and lots of jewelry. And I think sometimes when I look at people's accommodations page, it's like they just went wild at the jewelry. We'll take this, this, this. I had a kiddo the other day that had 48 accommodations. So I want to greatly caution you on having accommodations over 10. Say it with me, over 10. Because I don't expect Kristen to get up in the front of the classroom and deliver 48 accommodations for Lincoln and then say good morning. So an accommodation, remember, whether it's a 504 or an IEP, is a civil right, and you are bound to deliver them by the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. So I find that when a child has so many accommodations, maybe we need to reduce the accommodations and add some more special education, so that we're not making general ed teachers turn into special educators, right? A lot of the accommodations you have are duplicated. They're just different kind of words. So let's go in there with a pair of pruning shears and prune those down. I feel like 9 or 10 are plenty. Now, certainly if your child has a sensory disability, they are deaf and hard of hearing, they have a medical condition, they're medically fragile or complex, they have a vision impairment, or they are deafblind, then you will have more accommodations, but those could sit in their healthcare plan, they could sit in their AT supplement, they could sit in their behavior intervention plan, they could sit in their expanded core curriculum supplement. So really go in and let's make this document perfect for this student only on their needed accommodations. Okay. Pillar number 4, LRE. So, or as we would say in the law, extent of non-participation. So we get this confused. LRE is not a location. I know, it's shocking, isn't it? It is not a location. It's a consideration. And the committee is required to consider where we implement the student's IEP. So of course the law says that we implement the student's IEP to the maximum extent possible with supports and strategies with their non-disabled peers. However, the law is assumptive. So it assumes you knew what it didn't say. I should have just said everything, right? So LRE may not be in general ed. There's no data that says every kid is going to maximize their IEP in general education. And so it's not good news or bad news. Nobody's feelings should be hurt if a student's not successful in general education. But if that's not where that student can make gains on their identified IEP goals, then we talk about another setting. Now, in the LRE, there is a continuum, right? And we have trainings on Special Education Academy YouTube and all of our platforms. You can get those. But just like everything else in life is a continuum, very quickly, we have about 3 settings in special ed. It's a Karenization, but it's kind of true. So we have general education, right? And then we can do a lot of things to adjust that. General education with accommodations, general education with special ed support, general education with modifications, general education with co-teacher. There's a lot of ways to do that, right? And then we have supplementary aids and services under 300.115 under the federal code called resource. And guess what? We still have resource. We're always going to have resource. And those are usually for kiddos that are 2 or 3 years behind academically. And that we need to modify the learner expectation. We're modifying the learner expectation. They usually need a smaller setting. And then they're able to go through the bulk of whatever their needs are. Additionally, you're going to have self-contained settings. And those vary from autism units to adaptive behavior, to self-contained units that are an alternate setting, meaning they're doing an alternate curriculum. And so We want to look at where is the best place to implement the IEP. It's not one and done, right? So I have kiddos that have an intellectual impairment, disability, and they are in life skills for some of the day. They're in general ed for some of the day. They're in resource for some of the day. So it's not, you don't have to pick one. We do what's appropriate based on content areas. So if he has 7 classes, we need to talk about in those 7 classes, where can he be successful? And it's really a very clean conversation. Where can he be successful? And we have those every year. So we make sure that we're doing our best to implement the least restrictive environment. And when we look at the least restrictive environment, we're looking at 2 things, always in special ed, always. Even if you never leave general ed and you have an IEP, there is always 2 things in play, meaningful benefit and harmful effect. And we're always trying our best to calibrate those so that we can say, we know that there's a harmful effect, but we believe the benefits outweigh any assumed harmful effect, okay? So pillar number 5, students required right up there was needed, special education support time, SOS, save our student. Schedule of services, determination of services, depending on where you're on the United States, it's listed very different. And those are a minimum requirement that we list on this page, the student's special education support time. So there's no requirement on that page that we list volleyball and math and science if that student doesn't have any special ed time. Some districts will do that, but most just list the special education time. So how do I calculate that, Karen? Well, what we don't calculate is everybody gets the same thing, because everybody's not the same person. And the I stands for individual, right? And so when I get an IEP and he gets 100 minutes in math, 100 minutes in English, 100 minutes in science, 100 minutes in social studies, I'm like, oh, let's talk through these pieces, right? So I, as a standard, as just a rubric, if I have a kiddo in general education that needs supports and services and even modifications, I'm going to ask the teacher, how long is that block? And so I'm terrible with math. So let's say the block is 60 minutes, right? I'm going to start out no more than a third, right? And probably even 25%, because 2 things happen in the class, instruction and production. So while Kristen's teaching, I don't need Michelle going, right? That was not going to work. So during that production time, how much support on the schedule of services page do we think that he's going to need to be able to make expected gains on his IEP goals, right? So, and that's what we calculate. We can come back and adjust it. But this notion that he gets the whole time, we just have somebody in there, that's not accurate. So let's be accurate. Just like for, if you were taking a prescription, you wouldn't just say, take some, right? We want it to be clean and clear based on the student's current identified unique circumstances. Okay. So next, partnering with the school for appropriate implementation of FAPE. So this is one of the biggest questions that I get on my webinars or social media. How do I know they're doing it, Karen? Well, I assume competency. I assume that they're doing it. I also assume that parents have our obligation, duty, and responsibility to partner with the school, right? We're not dropping them off for a haircut and picking them up, right? They're educators who lay down their lives for children. I think it's amazing that adults take other people's children for the whole day. That's amazing. You should get them all a gift, right? So how do I partner with the school? So while I'm in the meeting, I'm letting the committee know that we'll be partnering together, right? I'm not the boss of you. You're not the boss of me, so that we can both be helpful to make sure that this kid makes expected gains, right? So I'm going to say, Kristen, just wanted to let you know, I wanted to get a copy of his progress reports and his data collection sheets at the end of the grading period, so that we can really keep track of that, right? I expect parents, we wrote these IEP goals, and let's say that we said he was going to be at, or math say he's going to be at 80% after 4 grading periods. Well, if I get to the first grading period and he's at 5%, probably not going to make that 80% in 4 grading periods. So I need the parents, along with the team, the school-based members, to partner to say, do we need to come back to the table and look at making adjustments in this goal, the delivery, the special education services, or the criteria? Additionally, you need to make sure that if there's something that the school can provide, that you have a second copy of that. So if we're doing, laminated visual supports or raised paper or highlighted, whatever the school's doing to make Billy successful, please let the parents know so that we can partner with you and be replicating that so we can maximize his gains. I find that schools do a great job serving kids with disabilities, but you have to partner with them. You can't just show up in a year going, I'm not happy, right? You have to partner with them. Does everything have to be an IEP meeting? Say with me. No, everything does not have to be an IEP meeting. But conversations at the car pickup line, probably not the best way to have a conversation with Kristen about Billy's educational need, right? So we have this great technology now. We can all Zoom, set up a meeting, and have touch points, right? So that you can say, is there something I can do? Is there something I can do when he goes to his dad's house or my mom's house? Is there anything that I can do to help? Because as we work together, that's going to maximize the student's outcome. We're all going to be speaking the same language, and we'll have a better probability and possibility of a free, appropriate public education. And people always ask me, what does that acronym mean? So it means whatever is appropriate based on your child's unique circumstances, right? And appropriate is going to be, measured and molded by a number of things, but we're looking at an educational need. Remember, an educational need. So there's three models, right? There's a medical model, a therapeutic model, and an educational model. So be sure, parents, when you go into a school, and let's say that your private OT sees him 3-4 times a week, that's not going to be the model in public school, right? Because every time we deliver a child a service, which they may need to benefit from the RIP, we've removed them from content instruction. So work with the school to make sure that we're implementing a free, appropriate public education and your student can make appropriate gains. And then next slide, time to reassess your child. This is so important. It's one of the biggest missteps we do as schools, as advocates, attorneys, and parents is, right, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. No, it's not fine. So we need to reassess your child to make sure that we're doing things appropriately, right? And so every 3 years, there's a requirement, a triennial, that your child with a disability, that the team get together and look at those areas of assessment that we talked about before. We don't need to redo all of them. And maybe, just maybe, you agree that it's appropriate to do none of them. That's not usually my experience. It might be with your student, but you don't know what you don't know. And I have kids that are identified with disabilities, and parents are like, okay, he has autism and speech impairment, we're good to go. And then when they tested 3 or 6 years later, there became a new eligibility of a specific learning disability or ADHD. So kids evolve, they change, their needs change, or he might no longer meet eligibility for autism, but now he meets eligibility for ADHD. Why is that important? Because we provide eligibilities, don't drive placement or services, but they open the door for services. So we don't want to be serving a child based upon interventions for autism when his real eligibility is ADHD and attentive. So we always want to update that when it's appropriate. When can you get your child reassessed? Well, you can get your child reassessed as early as a year and a day. If you've already done the evaluation, you think that there would be meaningful information in the new evaluation. And if you've never done that evaluation, you can do that per request when the student is already in special education. Okay. Next slide, this is our mission statement, and we really believe that when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Sometimes it's hard to get it right. You know why? Because we're adults, and adults think differently and talk differently. But it's my experience that really there's just one team kiddo, right? And so my job as an advocate is to take parent passion and educator wisdom and move them together and convert them into a language that we can all understand. But more importantly, write a document that serves the student so that he can have gainful employment, independent living, and further education. And then on the next slide, our heart is to serve. We love people. We go live every week on social media. We have webinars on all the platforms. We have tons of content to serve you. So you can just reach out to us if there's anything you need at admin@specialeducationacademy.com. And the next slide, we train everyone that sits at the IEP table. We provide professional developments to districts in person via Zoom, and training parents and training people to become professional advocates. So again, if there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. And we really, really appreciate your time. There's all of our contact information. If you'd like to mail me some salt and pepper shakers, I do collect those. I do collect them year round. So, but we thank you for your time. But more importantly, we want to open up the most important thing, and it's the questions that you guys have.
Yes, there are a lot of questions in the chat box that have been coming up.
Okay.
as always, we love you so much. I'll leave the contact info up here for her. But when you do get these slides later today, you'll be able to click on all of these links to go to all of Karen's social media. Make sure you check out her TikTok stand-up comedy routines too, because she is hilarious. All right, Karen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you request a meeting for the IEP, it has to be honored, doesn't it?
I hope it's honored. I hope we're all adults. So certainly if I email and say I would like to have an IEP meeting, I would assume they're going to respond to you back within 48 hours. My request is I would like to have a review IEP meeting. Please provide me 3 dates and times to choose from.
And what if the counselor or the person at the school says that they just don't have enough time or bandwidth to deal with another student?
So I would ask for the information for the special education director for your district and send that information to them to let them rectify that.
Okay. Okay. Is it okay for my child to have a non-ESE teacher because the regular ESE teacher left?
No, so the law says in 300.156 of the federal code, requirements for special educators. It's very pristine. It's been pristine since December 2nd, 1975. It's never changed. There has never, ever, 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 ever been a waiver for special educators. Never happened. It didn't happen during Harvey. It didn't happen during COVID. We all sat around for 6 months, didn't we? Waiting for Betsy DeVos to go, you get a pass. There's no pass in special education. You know why? Because those kids don't get that time back. So it's a requirement. There's a letter that went out October 2nd, 2022 from the Office of Special Education Programs. And it says, it was a reminder to states. We have heard from advocates, attorneys, and parents and organizations that states are allowing non-special ed certified teachers who are on a path to get that certification to teach special education. And it's a violation of IDEA. No state can reduce the benefit of IDEA. So those two requirements are very clean and pristine under that OSEP letter. And so I would refer to that. And I would ask the school to make sure that we get a special ed staff member. If one is not provided to me, please provide me an offer of compensatory time.
Okay. And this question, I mean, it kind of follows, and it kind of seems like we have a lot of questions centered around this topic of basically, I don't think it's happening. You know, this one says my son hasn't had, none of his teachers were even aware that he had a 504. The ESE director has not been in touch with me. There's several other questions is that, you know, basically parents are just getting ignored and they're feeling like their kids are not getting the services. So could you kind of go through the steps that parents should take in this situation where they just feel like they're not getting what they are required?
Yeah, so absolutely. So often your feelings are valid. Sometimes they're not, but almost always they're valid. So here's what I would say. I would reach out to the campus and say, when do you think that you will be able to implement my students' 504 or IEP with fidelity? It's just a simple question. And based upon their response, then you decide your next steps. If the campus says they're not going to do that, willing, able, for whatever reason, the reasons don't matter. The reasons don't matter. Then I would reach out to, if the answer is no, I would reach out to the special education director because they have the ability to fix that and let them know your concerns. And is that something that they're willing to fix? If that doesn't occur, we have a series that you can watch on YouTube account, but your 6 dispute resolution options, and you have them from a district grievance, a state written complaint, mediation, dispute resolution sessions, due process, and federal complaints with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. You really only have rights if you invoke them, and it's very important that you do that.
That's so important because, like I said, that's what a lot of these questions are asking about. We're not getting what we think we need. This one is talking about their child's disability is kind of an invisible injury. They have a frontal lobe issue, and they, they need to get credit for high school, of course, but they have so many doctor's appointments and medical and mental health issues and all of that. Let me find the exact question. How can special needs kids with an IEP traverse the Texas compulsory attendance law when they have all these other appointments that they have to go to?
Right. And so that is a great question. And that happens, right? That happens for general ed students, 504 students, and IEP students. Any of those students could be considered for homebound or partial homebound based upon a current need. The need could be from a life-changing anxiety to having to go and get your chemotherapy treatments that inhibit the student physically, medically, or emotionally from attending the campus. So I would reach out to the school and say, I would like to set up a meeting for consideration for homebound. And that simply is supported by a medical doctor's note indicating that it would be appropriate at this time to deliver his or her education at home.
So for everybody who's watching, I've put up the contact information and the links for the social media for Consolidated Planning Group. If you would like more information about the financial aspect and benefits, federal and state benefits, we would love to set up a meeting with you. These are over Zoom. They typically take about 30 to 45 minutes, completely free. You can ask us any questions you want, and then we'll tell you about how we work and what we do and what we charge, and see if it's a good idea for us to move forward together. In a moment, I'm going to go back to Karen's contact info being on the screen. I'll kind of go back and forth as we wrap up these questions. Is it appropriate, Karen, that a school staff member says at a 504 meeting that your child should go on medication?
Would it be appropriate for me to say to the staff member that they should go on medication? That is unbelievably it's just bad manners. It's inappropriate. The only person should be talking to you about medication is a medical doctor. And I would say at the meeting, please don't discuss that with my client. It makes us very uncomfortable and it's inappropriate. Plus, children have little children bodies. So I'm greatly concerned when people say that. Additionally, medicine doesn't change you having a disability. It might help you attend, it might reduce your seat, it might do a lot of benefits, but medicine, just like special education, also may have a harmful effect. Before we're telling somebody with a little tiny 7-year-old that you should take medicine so you can pay attention or do better in school, I would keep that thought to yourself.
Very, very true. Yeah. My question would be like, oh yeah, when did you get your doctorate? When did you become a
That's my answer in
pediatrician?
my head, Michelle. I try to keep it inside.
See, that's why I'm not as good as you, because I just let those words fly sometimes, put my foot in my mouth. Um, this parent is starting to see ODD tendencies, but they don't have a diagnosis for that yet. Can they get additional testing to support those behavioral issues and get counseling on his IEP?
So any student in public school can immediately have psych services. So whether you're general ed, 504, or special education. ODD is a very real thing. It would end up falling under the scope of the eligibility of ED. And those are 5 areas of eligibility. And there are many services that we have to support that, including the related service of counseling as a related service. But parents, you don't have to wait for something else to get the school to test. Because even if you showed up with a report from the Surgeon General, the school district has a duty, onus, and obligation to do their own testing. So waiting is the worst thing that you can do in education or special education. Speak up and partner with the school to get what your kiddo needs.
So what if the child isn't in school yet? You mentioned that at the beginning, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so you can have testing as early for a 2.5-year-old. We have programs called ECSC, Early Childhood Special Education. The primary criteria for that is that you must have a disability of a speech impairment, and really it's a profound speech impairment. And so those services are available through public schools. Again, the process would be the same when you request a full and individualized evaluation. Let's say that your kid is homeschooled or at a church school or a private school, and you're wanting them to start public school in their 4th grade. Again, you would do the same process as quickly as you can before they actually start to get that testing done. The testing takes, depending on where you live in the United States, 30, 45, or 60 school days. And you get in line behind the other kids in line. So there's no expediting the process. You can't tip the hostess and move to the front of the line. So knowing that's going to take in Texas 25% of the school year, don't wait.
So, and then you said at the beginning of the call as well, that if they're not in school yet, they can call the district special
Special
ed.
education, yeah, the special in charge of special services, special education director, director of student support services will be able to let you know who is the person that you would meet with. You'd probably meet with either an LSSP, an LPC, a social worker, depending on where you live, or a diagnostician to sign notice and consent for that testing.
All right, next question. How can we address when the school doesn't want to add more academic goals to the IEP because they would duplicate the regular ed goals, but the child is way behind grade level and not catching up?
Well, this is what I always say when somebody says something goofy. Good news. We don't want you to write an IEP goal for a general ed goal because that wouldn't be special education. We have an obligation to write an IEP to enable him to make progress. Mrs. Smith, you just said in the present levels, he's not making progress. So I am in agreement with you that we need to write an IEP goal around that. Part of the problem with IEP goals is we have a terrible present level. The present level should take up 75% of the meeting, and really everything is downhill from there because all the identified needs, the goals that you're going to need, the accommodations you're going to need, the services you're going to need, we've already identified that in the present levels. I would say if your present levels aren't 3 pages long, you're not finished.
All right. Um, okay, this person wants your assertiveness and your advice in dealing with this situation. See, she says, the gen ed teachers are instructed to contact the literary coach to get the forms for interventions, and they monitor the progress. If the student is reading below grade level, sometimes the teachers don't do this necessary step unless a parent reaches out. But if they're making progress, they're not being tested. They also just expect that the students' grades are going to be in the tank if they really need extra support. So I guess it seems like they're not really paying much attention unless the child is failing. So she wants your advice on how to deal with this in her district.
So it sounds like she is a school-based member. And first of all, I'd like to say we love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for serving kiddos. You know, two things that we don't do well is we don't really ask the right questions, right? Good answers come from better questions. I don't find any child in the last 5 years that's not on the AB honor roll. So I don't believe anybody's grades. I'm sorry. I went to school in a covered wagon. If we got a C, we got a C. That's how that went down. Now, school districts, it's not the teacher's idea, are required to test and test and test and test and test and test and retest, right? So I want to know two things. I want to know his independent reading and his instructional reading. And I want to know if he's 3, and I want to know if he's 22. It says in Reading Rockets 1999 that we know that reading fluency is the only bridge to comprehension. I want to know his WCPMs, what is words correct per minute. I'm going to take 90 years of oral reading fluency, which you can find on eric.ed.gov, and look at what is that expectation. First graders should read 59 words correct per minute. Fifth graders should read 138 words correct per minute. Most of my students and our team members, their kids are reading tragically behind. And the hardest thing, in my opinion, to improve a child in the 4 areas of reading would be fluency, right? But fluency is the only bridge to comprehension. And for some reason, we've stopped measuring that. So I'm going to be asking for that to be in the present levels. I'm going to be asking, is his math in the normed range? Is his behavior in the normed range? Is his writing in the normed range? I'm going to ask for those district assessments, that Renaissance 360, that IXL. Let's look at that data. I know that teachers love kiddos and they give A's and B's, and that's fine. I don't care if he reads on first grade and 7th grade. I want him to be the best first grade reader. But to say he's so cute, I love him, I'd take 5 Billies. That does not set him up for success for the next 80 years once he leaves school. So you have to ask the tough, clean, clear questions and stick your position until we get that information. We can't go on. I'll get that for you later. No, ma'am. We need that information to make best decisions for that student. If that means we need to table this meeting, that's fine. And while we reconvene, here are the things that we need to better populate this present level.
Perfect. Can the 504 or IEP be changed without speaking to a guardian or parent first and getting approval?
So here's the problem with the 504. Are y'all listening? They can actually have a 504 meeting and never tell you and call down your 7-year-old. So I'm not a fan of the 504 for my kiddos. Probably in 28 years, I've had less than 5 kids that should have been on a 504. An IEP cannot be changed without a convened, either a paper amendment where the parties agreed to waive the actual convening of the meeting. It's required that you convene on 2 areas, eligibility and minutes. Only decisions are made in an IEP meeting. So when I get in a meeting, they go, oh, we've already talked to mom. We talked to mom. We talked to mom. It wouldn't matter if you talked to everybody on the planet. We make decisions when presented to the entire committee so that everybody can weigh in. So you make decisions in an IEP meeting. It would be illegal and a violation of your procedural safeguards and parental rights to have an amendment to an IEP without parental participation and or input.
Is it true that if there are modifications on the IEP that the student will have to graduate with a special ed diploma?
Oh my Lord.
We have,
You know what? I feel like sometimes special ed is like a news channel that's not true. So my oldest son was in special education. He graduated and he's a grown man. So in Texas, we have so much shenanigans that's told to people from parents, from advocates, from like, I just don't know where they heard this. So here's what you need to do. If you have a question about anything in your state, we have compliance at every state. I find all SEAs, all state education agencies, amazing. If you're watching in Texas, you would email inquire, INQUIRE, at spedtex, SPEDTEX.org, and they will answer your questions. So I would put, hey, Kristen said you have to wear purple socks on Thursdays to graduate in Texas. Is that true? And then I would say this next line, please tell me where that is in the code. If it's in the code, they'll give you the link. And it's Kristen's right. We got to wear purple socks on Thursdays. If it's not in the code, Kristen was possibly misinformed and you need to go back to the table and have a meeting. Here's the line. Please tell me where that is in the code. Texas and every state has amazing guidelines that give clarity around state statutes, regulations, and requirements.
There's a note here. Thank you so much. You deserve all the salt and pepper shakers in the world.
Can you tell my husband that?
Well, you know, jewelry and salt and pepper shakers, you know, which
What
one
else
does
do you
he
need?
want to buy you?
Yeah.
Is there some way that tutoring can be covered or a student can work with that is not the same as the, you know, helper in the classroom for a student who is learning and listening disabilities?
Sure. So we can, I'm caution on the word tutor because that's just general, right? We design the IEP so the student can make progress. So I've had schools and settlements provide what you might call tutoring from a teacher at a different campus, right? Billy's in 4th grade. I'll have a 7th grade reading specialist come in and work with him. But I really caution when I think of tutoring, I think outside of the instructional day, you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that only adults go to work after 5 o'clock and drink a pot of coffee because we have bills to pay, right? There's no data, I know you don't want to hear this, that supports more academics after school is going to make a difference. It just doesn't exist. I understand that there needs to be a little bit of repetition, but for my kids with disabilities, I want them to have what they need during the instructional day, right? I certainly want them to spend 20 minutes at home doing Kurzweil or learning Ally or something like that. But tutoring, I wouldn't ask for that in the instructional day. I would ask for the appropriate interventionist, paraprofessional, or special educator to serve those deficits.
Okay. These two questions kind of go together, and they're about reevaluations.
Yeah.
So should it be more than just, should it be another full evaluation, or just basic, like looking over what they've already done? And then once you do have a reevaluation, should you request an ARD meeting right after that?
So the evaluations are needed evaluations, right? If I was taking Michelle to the doctor, I wouldn't say give her every test in the hospital you can give her. We do testing that's appropriate so we can identify the need. We're just looking to make sure that we're identifying the need. If we don't identify the need, we could never properly serve it. So do I ask for everybody to have a sociological evaluation? No. Do I think that you need a new cognitive evaluation every 3 years? No. I might add on auditory processing. I might add on long-term retrieval, right? So it's those needed evaluations as you walk through that reevaluation. Once those reevaluations are done, the report will be finished within so many days. And then 30 days after that, you have to have an IEP meeting to discuss those results.
My school tells me they only have time to meet for half an hour for the IEP meeting.
And I would say, well, that sounds fantastic. Let me get my appointment book. It looks like we won't be able to have a successful business meeting. And let's look at another time that works for all the members. Yeah, just like that.
There's no staff to provide speech.
Super. It sounds like the school is unable to provide him an educational product. Please let me know what private speech pathologist will make up these minutes. Just easy. Yeah.
I love your responses to these. There's a lot more questions in the chat box, I think, but we are at 12:56 and we're supposed to wrap this up at 1 o'clock. So I just want to mention again, everybody will get a copy of this webinar. Please watch it over again. There's so much great information in this webinar. We love Karen and we love the way she explains things. So you'll be able to get some of your questions answered by watching again. Also, you can reach out to Karen. She provided all of this helpful contact info, her social media links. She loves helping people just like we do. If you have questions on the financial planning side of things, the benefits your children should be getting, federal and state benefits, money side, that's us at Consolidated Planning Group. So if we were not able to get to your question today, and I know that we can't get them all, please, please, please just reach out to either Karen or myself, and we will get those questions answered for you. I'm going to try to find one more, but reading through all of these,
I do want to just answer one question real quick. First, I want to thank Northeast ISD for sponsoring this and having us. We appreciate you. Thank you for serving kiddos. Number two, how do you become an advocate? We train people to do that every day, all day long. We have digital products and live events. We would love to train you to be an advocate, however you sit at the 504 IEP table. So just email us.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Karen. And we'll go ahead and end on that note. I think if you want to become an advocate, sign up with Karen. She, like I said, all of her social media is fun to watch. There's a lot of great information. Thank you all for attending today. If you want to send any love letters to Karen, her contact info is all here. If you want to send love letters to me, my office contact info is here. We love hearing kind words. So have a great day, everybody. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Y'all.
Kristen, thank you for hosting. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.